One of the most warmly welcomed new boats of 2023 was undoubtedly Marex's new 440. Now that was launched just last month in Cannes, and according to the boss at Marex, they sold 10 boats at the show alone. Well, we had a little walk around dockside in Cannes, but happily just a month later we've been invited to this rather lovely lake in Lithuania, a country where Marex has been building boats now for more than 20 years, to take this boat out on the water and see exactly what she can do. I remember being really quite impressed with the helm position of this boat at the Cannes Yachting Festival when I saw it, and generally boats from this part of the world, from the Nordic states, they're ergonomically very sound, but with a well-established builder like Marex, you expect that, and you absolutely get it here. What we have is a pair of 16-inch plotters on the upper level here. I think there's enough space there actually for a pair of 19 inches if you prefer. We've also got everything you want at your right hand. Right next to the throttles we've got the zip wake system plus the joystick. We also got this door on the starboard side, twinned with the one of course on the port side, so if you're operating single-handed it's a piece of cake. You can make your way fore and aft on both sides of the boat. We've got boarding points on both sides of the boat, plus quick access to cleats with an easy reach, and rails of course for hanging your fenders. What I also like here is the fact they've slightly shortened this part of the dash so that the zip wake isn't interfering with your knee, but you can adjust this entire section to make yourself more comfortable. Bring it out towards you, and you do also have an adjustable wheel there, so getting the right position for yourself is not at all difficult at this helm. And I like the seats too, I have to say. I'll just shift this back a little. Now it's very rare on a boat of this scale that you have 4 forward-facing seats. Generally it's 2, perhaps 3, but here we got 4, 2 on either side, all forward-facing, so if you've got a family of 4 you can all be properly involved in the day out. And we've also got an undercut backrest. That's very deliberate, so that when you're sitting at anchor or alongside, a couple of people can just properly lounge facing inboard towards each other, even if you don't have the additional seating that Scandinavia version involves, and you've got the big galley of this Gourmet Cruiser, this test boat. There's still plenty of opportunity to sit here in the shelter of the wheelhouse itself and relax with a glass of wine. So that's very attractive. But look, we've already seen this boat at the Yachting Festival, the Cannes Yachting Festival. What we really want to do is get her up and running and see how she performs. So we'll do exactly that right now. We got on single lever, and the zip wake system is on automatic for the time being. Now we've got options with engines here. This test boat uses IPS drives, a pair of IPS 650s, 480 horsepower apiece. You can also have 440 horsepower stern drive setup, and the guys are also working on a shaft drive system. That's not ready yet, but it will be over the course of the next year or so. So we'll get her up and running. It's quite a heavy boat this, around about 15 tons. We've got 3 people on board. Quite a bit of fuel, quite a bit of water too. But the poke's pretty good. We're seeing 10 knots in about 6 seconds, 20 knots in about 11. And we're cruising up towards 30 knots now. That takes about 20, 21 seconds. But of course this boat is not about performance, it's not about outright grunt. Espen has no interest in that. What he wants to do is create the world's best family boats between 30 and 50 feet. And realistically, that doesn't involve going more than about 35 knots. And that's what we're seeing here at the top end, 35.5 knots we're getting here today. Espen reckons he's had it around about 37 with a lighter load. And that's very easy to believe. But as I say, it's not about outright performance, it's about comfort and refinement, and there's certainly plenty of that on offer. If I reduce it a little down to about 32 knots, that's a bit of a sweet spot, because at everything between 22 and 32 knots, we're seeing the fuel flow hover at about 4.5 litres per nautical mile. It sort of fluctuates a bit, 4.3 to 4.7, but we've got a pair of 595 litre tanks on this boat, so we're 20% in reserve. We're working with about 900 litres, so you're easily seeing a range of 200 miles at cruising speeds. And it is very comfortable too. At those speeds, we're seeing about 70 to 73 decibels. So it's very easy just to have a conversation on a lengthy cruise without having to raise your voice, without it becoming tiring at all. And there's a couple of reasons why this boat is so quiet actually. And the first is the fact that being a Marex is pretty well built, it's pretty heavily built. The second is the fact they concentrate very hard on sound insulation back there in the engine bays. So you don't hear too much noise escaping from there, and actually that's really useful when you come to anchor and you want to operate your generator, because we've had a little play with that alongside. It's absolutely whisper quiet. You'd barely even know it's operating, so that's very attractive indeed. And also here in the wheelhouse itself, you see these microfiber soft touch fabrics everywhere you look. So that helps soak up a bit of that sound, deaden the sound a little bit, just muffle it. So it really is very refined indeed. Now part of that efficiency of course comes from the fact that, as I say, this is not designed to be a performance boat. So actually the dead rise aft sits around about 13 degrees. That's relatively flat, relatively shallow. So much easier to push this boat up onto the plane and to keep it there. Obviously the forward quarters of the hull, they have much finer angles of attack to help soften that ride in a sea state. We don't have a sea state to play with here today of course because we're on a lake. But she certainly feels very well sorted in terms of her stability and her balance. To get her a little bit up to speed, we'll have a little play and throw her around a bit. You'll see she heels. She heels over a tree. And that turn is not particularly radical. If you want a little bit more aggression in terms of those turns, in terms of that handling, then you'll be better off opting for the stern drives, but certainly she behaves very nicely indeed. As I say, visibility all round is pretty good. And when we turn to port, even though visibility is of course restricted as we heel in, we do have this manual sunroof above us. So you can slide that back and uprate your visibility there. And actually, while I'm talking about the sunroof, it's quite interesting that since the prototype we saw in Cannes, the guys at Marex have elevated this deck by about 12 centimetres. So when you pull that sunroof back, you can actually stand up here at the helm and see out above this upper moulding as a 6-footer very comfortably. Now that we're safely back alongside, let's head to the aft end of this boat and take a look at the swim platform, because that in itself is quite a clever piece of work. As you can see, it's a good scale. We've got these little brackets built into the deck, so of course it can take a tender, and at the press of a button just here, this entire platform drops down to water level, or down to 60 centimetres beneath water level, so you can simply drive your tender onto there and lift it back out. Move over to the port side, you'll see that absolutely no space at all is wasted. Here we've got your transom shower plus your hot and cold water, your mixer tap. And under this rather elegantly swept lid, you'll see we've got fender storage in there, plus an additional place for your lines. And this is quite neat, a little cutout, so that once you've tied off, you can just put the loose stuff in there, just to tidy things away nicely. To the side of that, we've got a deck shower. As you can see, it's on a little coil that again keeps things just that bit tidier. To the side of that we have more storage, again big enough for your fenders and your lines. On the other side of the companionway we have another hatch, again big enough for a pretty bulbous fender and some lines, but as you can see we've got some tracks in here, which is for the installation of the optional telescopic passerelle. And while we're talking about the passerelle, actually, it's quite interesting to note that Marex is investigating the idea of creating a swim platform that also elevates by 40 centimetres and has a kind of hinged fold-out passerelle that simplifies the job, makes it far more practical. That's something for the future. In the meantime, what we have on the starboard side is an additional hatch, which I really quite like. We've got the shore power in here, as you can see, right there in the leading end of that compartment. You can pull that out, rather like the deck shower. It's on its own dedicated coil. And when you're finished with it, there's a button here, you simply press that and in it goes very neatly back into its guide. Really good solution, that. What else I like back here is the canvas and the means by which that is erected. As you can see, it's been erected today because we've had some pretty inclement weather. I'll pop round the side, you'll see that they're stored in these little lockers, one on either side of course, ready to go, and you can rig them very quickly. They simply slide around these guides into position, and when you've done that, this neat little undercut in the mouldings here, allied to these little fixing points, enables you to pull this good and taut, really tension it so that the wind doesn't buffet it and no wind gets into this space when you've cordoned it off and you're running your diesel heating or your air conditioning. So it's quick and it's simple and it's very, very effective indeed. Before we take a look into that cockpit though, let's take a couple of steps up and head forward along the starboard side deck. Now you'll see that the rails actually stop a good way forward. That's going to be changed on future production models. It's going to come back here to increase security, and it's also going to be elevated a touch, an additional 8 centimetres on top of that. Again, for a better feeling of security as you make your way fore and aft. The rail up here will also be elevated, the forward rail by about 5 centimetres, just so it falls nicely to hand rather than having to stoop to grab hold of it. As we come up these steps, you'll see that we've currently got naked mouldings around the top of the screen there. That will also have a rail to help you up, keep you safe when the seas are a little rocky. And up on this forepeak, well, everything on the face of it seems relatively conventional, relatively formulaic. We've got a central island sunbed with elevating backrests. We've got a couple of cup holders built into astonishingly thick pieces of timber there. And we've got some deck lights there to introduce a bit of light down below, even when you've got people on that sunbed. So that makes lots of sense. But there are a couple of things to point out here that separate this boat from the crowd. For a start, this I really like. Now that entire unit, that entire sunbed cushion, it's quite firm. It's a closed cell foam. You can chuck that overboard and that has sufficient buoyancy that an adult and a couple of kids can lie on that and use that as a lilo on the water. So that's a very nice touch indeed. And here, the anchor locker is pretty clever too, for a couple of good reasons. If we open that up, you'll see that we've got this, a fold-out platform with a ladder built into it so that you can extend your forepeak through that step through in the guardrails. Very handy for Nordic style boating, but particularly handy because it's not a permanent fixture, which means you're not paying for an additional couple of feet, either for storage or for keeping your boat in the marina. The anchor itself, that's beneath here. If I lift that back up, you'll see, and that comes out through the stem of the boat rather elegantly, all operated from the helm of course, and there's a camera built in there above the anchor so you can actually see what's going on from the helm. Takes all the doubt out of it. It's a very neat touch. It's just about taking as much stress out of the boating experience as possible. Espen takes that really very seriously, so you'll see additional details throughout this boat as you walk around. Elements like this tow rail, which feels very secure at sea. That's got little deck lights built in, topped with natural teak, though of course you can have artificial stuff if you like. And we've got a stainless steel rail there on top of that wood just to protect it from lines when you're tying off. If we move further aft, you'll see on the hardtop, which itself is an extremely complex piece of equipment with its sunroof forward and a concertina sunroof aft over that cockpit, which we'll have a look at in a minute. We've got additional sections here with solar panels built in. We've got 8 there, though you can up that to 12 if necessary, so you can operate the majority of your domestic systems without having to rely on your generator. Now let's head further aft, past that boarding point, down another couple of steps. Good rails all the way around the back here. And we'll pop into this cockpit, which is very different to most that you see on the modern market. People seem a little bit obsessed with opening up transoms and making the entire aft deck wide open and accessible, increasing that sense of kind of intimacy with the sea and with the elements. But here, the entire cockpit space is entirely shut off, very secure indeed, and it uses peripheral seating all the way around, easily enough for 8 to 10 people, potentially even the full ship's company of 12 people. If we open that back up, what I also like is the fact that you can anchor this door in position, and it has a cushion on the leading edge. And the reason for that is the fact that Marex recognises how people gravitate towards corner seats. Everyone wants to nestle in a corner, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 proper corner seats in this cockpit. It's imperfect as things stand because this is anchored into place using a simple line around a hook, but they're going to use a little metal rod that goes into the deck and is operated from a quick release just up here to make the job much simpler. Now of course this table opens out, leaves on both sides to create a huge dining station, but you can also, if I come under here and take a look at these telescopic legs, you can also drop this into the space and use infills that are currently stored beneath the bed in the forward cabin to turn this into an absolutely enormous double berth. And if you choose to use it like that, of course, with these canvases closed off, you get the benefit of the diesel heating, the benefit of the air conditioning, and there are also blackout blinds that you can use for these. So you can turn it into a proper bedroom. And the benefit of that, of course, is the fact that you can also close off the aft end of this wheelhouse. At the moment that's opened right up so that we've got a degree of interaction between the galley and that aft cockpit. But with this window slid up into place and this door shut off, this is an entirely private cabin. And because we have access points to the side decks on both sides in the wheelhouse itself, it means there's absolutely no reason for anyone to get under anyone else's feet. It really is quite a practical solution as additional guest berths go. I also like the storage in here. Now we'll choose this particular unit as an example. We've got a little L-shaped lip at the back of the lid, and that's hinged from the top, which means that in tandem with these gaps beneath the backrest, you can lift this entire lid one-handed. The cushion stays in place, doesn't get shunted forward. It's a nice and easy job. The spaces themselves are pretty well lined as well. Plenty of volume in it, and your life raft, as you can see, slots on the port side beneath that seat. But certainly storage is by no means at a premium on this boat, and nor are options. If you decide that there's enough seating in the rest of the cockpit, this can all be spec'd as a wet bar, a little grill, cooking facilities to supplement those in the galley. But realistically, this galley is so utterly enormous on this Gourmet Cruiser layout that there's absolutely no reason to spec any additional cooking facilities elsewhere. Presumably that option of a wet bar on the starboard side of the cockpit will only really come into its own if you select this boat with the Scandinavia layout, in which case you trade this entire galley section on the port side for a U-shaped seating unit that encompasses that forward co-pilot seat. In that case, you just get a smaller galley on the starboard side. But while we're in here, let's take a little look at this galley, because as I say, this is the Gourmet Cruiser, so this is the centerpiece of this particular model, and it is massive, I have to say. Massive in terms of its footprint, but also massive in terms of its scale, because these worktops are actually 94 centimetres high, which is about 7 centimetres more than you would tend to find in your home or on most boats. So that creates extra volume down below, and it also makes it much more comfortable to use because it falls naturally to hip height. What we have in here is an oven at the aft end, plenty of storage drawers around there, additional storage drawers beneath the cooker, and the hob top itself is induction, though you can of course have gas if you prefer. There's also a really big pair of sinks here, each with independent lids, and I'm happy to say that they also come with little brackets there, so you can stow them in place. Keeps it nice and tidy, and it also, when you're using the sink, avoids splashing the people who might be sitting on the other side of that backrest. Now the fact that we've got all the cooking on this port side means that the starboard side is pretty much geared up for the refrigeration duties. We see that a fair bit, but not to this degree. So we've got a couple of fridges there, big pull-out fridges that total around 230 litres of capacity. If I swing around and take a look at that port unit, I should say, we also have a 100-litre fridge built into that too. And to supplement those three fridges, we have an additional one beneath this worktop. Really nice solution, this, absolutely cavernous, and that in itself is a couple of 100 litres. And that kind of reveals partly what this boat is all about. It's just about providing you with really high-end cooking facilities, a proper social hub of a galley. It's also about enabling you to enjoy this for long spells at sea without having to rely on marinas, on shoreside facilities, on constant topping up of supplies. You could easily put enough gear in these fridges to keep you going for a couple of weeks at a time. And actually, when you look at the figures, you see the design actually backs up that idea. So you've got a 780 litre water tank, which is much, much larger than you would tend to expect on a boat of this size. And it also has a 335 litre black water tank, which will take you cruising for much longer spells than you would tend to expect from most boats in this class. We also have plenty of storage space under the sink, plus space for a bin in there. Additional smaller units built into this starboard section. I really like this actually. This is purpose built for your sauces, for your oils, for your condiments, so they're not rattling around elsewhere and getting in your way. Down below, the test boat is rigged with a 3-cabin layout. There is also a 2-cabin layout available, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But for now, let's head straight forward into the owner's cabin and see what we see. Now, what we have here is a large raised double bed, no taper at all, even though it's up there in the V of the bow. Nice big mirror, backlighting, reading lamps. I have to say the general atmosphere in here is lovely. We have curved bulkheads lined with kind of fibrous, natural looking carpet. It's very attractive indeed. The windows are a good size, and they use blinds rather than curtains, which feels very modern and clean. If I spin around, you'll see that we have a decent bit of storage here too. Open that up, we've got good hanging storage. Here's the whole sides, again lined with carpeting, plus an additional unit further down. There's the vents for our heating. We've also got storage built into the side units as well, so really no space at all is wasted on this boat, but it doesn't feel like it's trying too hard. Headroom is fantastic, as you can see. Tapers a little towards the forward end, but not a great deal. There's plenty of space there to sit up in bed and read. If I turn around and face aft, you'll see that the ensuite facilities are on the port side. Now, there's not sufficient room here for you to fully open that door. That makes contact with the foot of the bed there. So it's a bit of a squeeze in that regard, but there's plenty of space to get through that gap and in. And when you do so, this is quite a cleverly arranged space. It's not particularly massive, but we have natural light from up above. One of those deck lights on the foredeck there, frosted as you'd expect. We have a nice elevated sink unit, a really, really good size of window with opening porthole, more mirrors to bounce that light around, a low-level loo, high-level storage. It does quite a lot with a compact space, and this is what I particularly like. If we just open out this bulkhead here and pop that across, that entirely cordons off your sink and your toilet, which means you can pop your towels over there, have your shower over here, and then open it back up and get dry when you're done. You don't soak all your gear while you're showering. So it's a wet room of sorts, but you can divide it into two. That's a very clever solution with a relatively compact space. Let's close that back up and head further aft. I also like this, I have to say. These frosted glass panels in the doors to help keep the light flowing throughout this lower space, but at the same time retaining privacy because they have blinds built into the back of them. So that's a very clever solution as well. Moving aft, you'll see that we have 2 cabins, one on either side. It's a fairly standard sort of setup, but it makes great use of the elevated furniture on both sides, as we'll see. So if we go to starboard first, now this is the section beneath the helm, so as you'd expect with a step down, headroom is extremely good. I have to pretty much straighten my arm to reach the deck head there. Again, we have some decent storage plus a changing area down below. And if I bend down and look aft, you'll see that we have this rigged as a double, but you can also have this rigged as a twin if you prefer. More of these soft carpeted bulkheads works very well. And a huge, huge low-level window, which gives you fantastic views from the bed. If we move across to the other side, you'll see it's similar in some regards, but there is a little extra space at the entrance point, and that's very well used here. As I say, this is pretty well set up for cruising duty, so if I close that door over and we open this, we have a really high capacity washer dryer in there. Very useful, as I say, on a cruise. More storage, again every spare cubic inch is well used. A little changing seat, and this is set up as a twin or as a single with a settee. It's very cool, and you can use the backrest from that settee to slot it in the centre and turn it into a double, not dissimilar to the one we just saw on the starboard side. Again, here's that headroom that we talked about, really lofty. Another big window, another opening porthole. It's a very, very impressive space, but it can be made much, much more impressive if you choose the two cabin option, in which case this cabin goes all the way across through to the starboard side, a full beam mid cabin with direct access to its own head compartment here on the port side. The day heads then is on the starboard side across the companionway through this frosted glass door. If I step down into there, you'll see that headroom is again as impressive as elsewhere on this boat. We also got another skylight there on the foredeck for natural light in here, but I really like the way the lighting's done actually. In addition to that natural light, and you get plenty through that whole window as well, we've got a combination of spotlights and of an ambient glow from LEDs recessed beneath those panels that really works very well indeed. And as on the port side, we've got this partition which we can sweep across, so you can use this as a proper wet room using that shower without soaking all your gear. It's a very effective solution on a modest space. It's really easy to see then how this boat has become so successful even after a month or two on the market, because Marex has established for itself over the past 50 years a really powerful reputation as a builder of proper high quality family boats that are full of thoughtful design ideas, and this just takes that to a fresh level. And it's versatile too. You can have the IPS drives, or you can go for stern drives, or in the future shaft drives. You can have the 3-cabin layout, or if you prefer the 2-cabin layout, and you can have what I deem to be a really effective solution in the form of this Gourmet Cruiser, or if you prefer a more conventional saloon with extra seating, there's a Scandinavia layout too. But whichever way you choose to spec this thing, it's not just about those thoughtful and intelligent design ideas, it's also screaming out fastidious execution. And that, I think, is going to make this one of the most successful Marex models ever.